Well, hey Internet, and welcome to another thrilling and chilling episode of Thoughts We Might Have Had. This week we're going to take a break from our usual bitter and sarcastic commentary on modern pop culture and talk about Thanksgiving, as bitterly and sarcastically as possible. Ironically, Thanksgiving was started by a bunch of people who were fed up with something, namely the English church. This group primarily consisted of Puritans, separatists, and Cleveland sports fans, who decided to exile themselves from England and sail to America, which had recently been accidentally discovered by Christopher Columbus, several hundreds of years after it had been on purpose discovered by the Vikings, and several thousands of years after it had been discovered, lived on, and inhabited by the local natives. But here's a letter from Christopher Columbus as played by a trained actor in period costume.
Yeah, Micah, we don't actually have a historical letter from Christopher Columbus.
Oh, okay. Well, then here is a letter from definitely not Christopher Columbus as read by a trained actor in period costume.
We don't actually have period costumes.
Okay, all right. Here is a letter from definitely not historical Christopher Columbus as read by a trained actor in definitely normal clothes.
We don't actually
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
No problem.
So here's a letter from not Christopher Columbus, delivered in not period costume by Jefferson, in his pajamas.
Dear Abby, my name is Chris Columbo Columbus, and I recently returned to Spain after my third trip to the East Indies. As you probably know, I discovered the East Indies by sailing west and crashing onto a piece of land that resembled the Indies in no way. Recently, though, some guy named Amerigo Vespucci keeps claiming that I didn't discover the East Indies, but have in fact discovered a new continent. Some other dude named Leif the Leaf Erikson has also started talking about he and his descendants discovered this new continent hundreds of years before me. And, to top it all off, some of the indigenous tribes people who have been living on the continent for thousands of years keep complaining about my ridiculous acts of racism against them and their heritage. My question to you then, Abby, is this. Even with all that, do you think that thousands of years from now, people who work in banks and at the post office will get the day off because of my racist views and accidentally smashing my ships into the wrong landmass hundreds of years after someone else? Or does that seem stupid to you?
But anyway, these were different times in England, and many English people were trying to flee England because they thought the English church wasn't working out, which makes sense because the English church was started by this guy, Henry VIII, who in addition to being just a pleasure to look at, was what many important historians have called a complete raving psychopathic moron. He initially created the Church of England because the Pope, being, the Pope, wouldn't let him get a divorce. So he started his own church, got several divorces, murdered several women, and just kind of continued in that vein until, to the relief of every single woman in England, he died horribly. Though, back then everyone kind of died horribly, so whatever. But these particular people decided to leave England because telling the English king something he didn't want to hear was a good way to get beheaded and have your taxes raised. Though, not in that order. So anyway, Internet, in just a few minutes we'll have another important made-up historical letter read by someone in their pajamas, but this time they'll be playing a Quaker. A Quaker baker. It's perfect. So they set sail in a ship called the Mayflower, and upon arriving in America, they immediately began engaging in many important colonial activities. But why take my word for it when you can hear this actual historical letter as read by a trained actress in colonial... I don't even know why I started that sentence. Is there anyone who's not Jefferson who could do this for us?
I don't know.
Jefferson!
Yes?
I want you to go out into the world and try and find someone who is not you, who would be willing to follow you into a strange studio and read a historical letter in their pajamas for no actual pay.
Why their pajamas?
I don't know, Jefferson. It's a thing now. You don't question a thing. Miley Cyrus twerks. Pregnant women post baby bump pictures. We have made-up letters from made-up people in their pajamas. You don't question the wave. You just ride it.
Riding the wave, sir. Cassie, you wouldn't be interested
No.
Wise choice.
Dearest Mother, as you know, we arrived in the New World several months ago. Since our arrival, we have been engaged in many important historical activities, such as starving to death, being eaten by the local wildlife, and, if we couldn't think of anything else to do, freezing to death. When we first arrived, some of the local inhabitants tried to teach us things such as making fire, planting food, and how not to die. But they seemed sort of weird and different from us, and keep making crazy claims to our land just because they were here first and have lived on this continent for generations. We got all that worked out, though, this spring through an amazing display of generosity on our part, and we allowed them to teach us how to survive in exchange for naming Jeeps and mediocre sports franchises after them. It only seemed fair. Tomorrow we're getting everyone together for a big feast since we're no longer actively dying from lack of food. It'll just be a small gathering, because, once again, a lot of us are dead. But if it goes well, maybe we'll do it again next year, and the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that.
And there you have it, guys, the history of Thanksgiving. And on dare we say a slightly more serious note, I just want to take a second to thank our great cast, our wonderful partner Other Vision Studios, and of course, you the audience. We here at Thoughts You Might Have Had are, as has previously been mentioned, bitter and sarcastic and, kind of terrible people. But even we, on Thanksgiving, can take just a second, wish you all a happy year, many things to be thankful for, and may God bless. Oh, and like and subscribe, because that'll just, make us so much more thankful. Here's an actual letter from Christopher Columbus as performed by a trained actor.
So close.
I'm glad we made it so far down there. Ironically, Thanksgiving was started by a bunch of people who were fed up with something. They primarily consisted. Write that down. Copyright that. All right. And upon arriving in America, they engaged in many important colonial figures. But why take my word for colonial figures? They engaged them. I want you to go out into the world and try and find someone who is not you, who would be willing to perform a historical thing in a place with a stuff and a candlestick. Go do that.